I'm going to let you in on an open secret. I have no talent in mixing music or t-shirt design. I cannot do an English accent, Irish accent, or Afrikaans accent to save my life. Nor do I have the vocal range to give you the deep-voiced opening you hear at the start of each episode. The good news for me is there is always Fiverr. Fiverr.com allows you to hire freelancers for sometimes as little as $5 to do tasks that you have to get done for your business. Or sing happy birthday to your spouse in ways that are impossible for you. Or, honestly, the list could go on. Help yourself and help the show by using the link I provide in the show notes to see if Fiverr's freelancers can help you. Or if you have anything to offer Fiverr. My show was not possible without Fiverr. Some meaningful work in your life may now become possible with Fiverr. Go ahead and open the link in our show notes right now. Now, on to our show.
This is Forgotten Wars.
The year 1868 was nearing its end. William Gladstone's ascendancy at its beginning. His Liberal Party rode to victory late that year, winning a 112-seat majority, winning around 1.5 million votes compared to approximately 1 million votes for the opposition. Before Gladstone received the letter of formality from the Queen asking him to form a cabinet, Gladstone said, "My mission is to pacify Ireland." In 1869, Gladstone successfully began his mission by separating the Protestant Church of Ireland from the Church of England. His Irish Church Act of 1869 also meant the previous Church of Ireland couldn't force Irish people, especially Catholics, to ties to it anymore. This won Gladstone the appreciation of most Irishmen. Wait, what does this have to do with the Boer Wars? Winning and keeping Irish support with enough English support were crucial if Gladstone were to accomplish his mission, pacifying Ireland. More progress made on that mission in the early 1870s will be covered in a bonus episode. This mission to pacify Ireland would coincide with and steal focus and political capital from the Transvaal situation.
Under the British flag, you will have everything you desire, but that flag will continue to fly over the land.
Over the land, maybe. Over the people, never. You will see me in the field, fighting for our independence, long after you and your party who make war with your mouths have fled the country.
I don't think the Boers will have a chance.
Disarm your blacks. Active part of a white man in a white man's war.
Civilized war is awful.
In 1874, Gladstone and his Liberal cabinet lost elections because of, among other reasons, Gladstone's proposal to eliminate income taxes. A Liberal Party dying on the hill of income tax elimination. Gladstone was 65 years old. He ostensibly thought himself too old and too out of touch to continue leading the Liberal Party. So he stepped down from leadership. Gladstone wasn't out of leadership for long. Once he accepted Liberal Party leadership again, he was making speeches denouncing the British annexation of the Transvaal. Those speeches did not go unnoticed in the Transvaal. They were actually printed in pamphlets and circulated around the Transvaal. He was leader of the party when they again swept into power on April 5, 1880. The British commissioners, administrators, and agents close to the South African issue reported unanimously that, though the Boers weren't happy with being annexed, the Boers generally had acquiesced. They were coming around the same way the Cape Colony came around to British annexation. The way one argument went was, why not wait until there is strong evidence on the ground that the Transvaal cannot be governed before relinquishing British control of the colony? If the British government went back on annexation, surely South African Confederation would be doomed, right? And what about the report that decorated General and Governor Sir Garnet Wolseley had sent just months ago to the previous government? Wolseley had told the previous Secretary of State, quote, "The Transvaal is rich in minerals. Gold has already been found in quantities, and there can be little doubt that larger and still more valuable gold fields will sooner or later be discovered. Any such discovery would soon bring a large British population here. The time must eventually arrive when the Boers will still be a small minority, as the country is very sparsely peopled. And would it not therefore be a very nearsighted policy to recede now from the position we have taken here, simply because for some years to come, the retention of 2,000 to 3,000 troops may be necessary to reconsolidate our power?" End quote. Despite Gladstone and much of his cabinet's earlier criticism of the Transvaal annexation 4 years earlier, the Gladstone cabinet decided to stay the course in the Transvaal. The British weren't going anywhere. For any of you familiar with Gladstone's later history, this may remind you of what happened in Egypt in 1882. Gladstone initially had wanted to withdraw British forces from Egypt, but then uprisings there grew untenable. Gladstone wanted a concert of powers, a coalition of European forces to put the Egyptian Humpty Dumpty back together again. Instead, Gladstone had to sell, quote, "inescapable police action," end quote, in Egypt to Parliament by arguing that Christians there needed to be protected against atrocities by rebels and that this police action could help spread civilization. Instead of a concert of powers, Gladstone ironically led the British unilaterally into Egypt. Instead of a police action, British forces virtually invaded Egypt and then were stuck feeling they had to occupy Egypt for years to come. At first under the leadership of a prime minister who loathed unnecessary foreign entanglements and argued for the equality of nations. But now we're running ahead of our story. A character from earlier in our podcast got the Gladstone administration into some of its earliest trouble in the spring of 1880, Sir Bartle Frere. Remember? The High Commissioner for Southern Africa who tried to lay the groundwork for a Canada-style federation by strong-arming African tribes and the Cape Colony's Prime Minister. Sir Bartle Frere's often unauthorized aggression in southern Africa earned him ire from many liberals in London. Gladstone grew very unpopular with his own liberals when he didn't immediately recall Sir Bartle Frere. Gladstone didn't recall Frere for several months until the demands within his party grew too loud. Gladstone didn't hesitate thoughtlessly or make his decision to recall Frere lightly. Speaking in 1881, Gladstone said for 40 years, quote, "I have always regarded the South African question as the one great unsolved and perhaps insoluble problem of our colonial system." End quote. The Queen really liked Frere. Gladstone really liked the idea of a South African Confederation. But as 1880 continued, South African Confederation looked increasingly out of reach, and Frere more and more unpopular. So Gladstone performed the painful duty of sending a telegram of recall on July 29, 1880. Gladstone's administration also grew more unpopular with the Boers, as the promises to give the Transvaal true local governance went unfulfilled year after year. And as we already know, the Boer uprising did break out in December 1880, and days before they knew it, the Gladstone administration's hands were full with another war. After hearing about British defeat at Laing'sNek, Colley's boss, Secretary Hugh Childers, offered Colley reinforcements on January 29th. In addition to the reinforcements already on the way, Childers offered a light cavalry regiment from England and another from India. Colley was too proud. He declined these much-needed units, saying that his men were, in quote, "excellent spirits and eager to attack again," end quote, after the minor setback at Laing'sNek. Gladstone and company weren't convinced. Secretary Kimberley, Colley's other boss, strongly urged the administration to go in at full force to rapidly rout the Boers or seek peace with the Transvaal before seeds of further Boer bitterness or Zulu uprising were planted. With the Irish question taking up so much political oxygen, the cabinet opted for peace as soon as possible with the Boers. Even though Colley's camp at Mount Prospect sat at the end of a fragile supply and communications line that begged any competent adversary to try to cut it, Colley calculated considerable repercussions if he pulled back operations. British garrisons across the Transvaal could be demoralized. Boers sitting on the fence could swell the rebel ranks. The political situation in South Africa and Britain could continue to turn against the British. Colley could not risk all these possibilities. With the former commander of the Natal Frontier Force dead, Colley assumed personal command of the Natal Frontier Force. The Boers were buoyant. The Boers immediately set to work digging more trenches and breastworks near Laing'sNek. Rebel ranks swelled with more Orange Free State volunteers. Ewart remained wary, requesting Paul Krieger's presence and military expertise, and also asked Piet Cronje for reinforcements from Potchefstroom. Ewart sent mounted Boer patrols through Natal to alert him of any British troop movements. Scouts alerted him in early February that British reinforcements would head from Pietermaritzburg to Mount Prospect. Ewart decided with a war council that those reinforcements must be stopped. Field Commandant-generalNicholaasSmit led a 205-man patrol to stop the British reinforcements. This patrol quickly disrupted the British communication line to Mount Prospect. Colley wouldn't stand for this. If you would like to help keep Forgotten Wars producing and growing, would you do at least 2 of 3 things? First, would you share a link to the podcast with someone you think might enjoy it? Second, if you're listening on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or other providers, would you make sure to like or follow our podcast? If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, would you give us a 5-star rating and write a thoughtful review there? You can even do that while you're listening. Lastly, if you want more from the show, bonus episodes, behind the mic access, transcripts and sources, and much more, and you want to support the show, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/ForgottenWars. That is patreon.com/ForgottenWars. The link is also in this episode's notes. Thanks to those of you who have done one of these things already. Know that you're appreciated. Now, back to our episode. On February 8th, Colley led a force of about 400 men with even less mounted men than before to deal with Smut at 8:30 a.m. Colley issued no food rations or orders to bring a water cart along. Colley was confident that his force would smash Smut and return by 3:30 p.m. You are already getting the sense of where this is going. You just wait. Colley's forces reached the highest plateau, Skijnswerkter, above the Ingogo River. Smut saw the British reach this point with their artillery and took the decisive action that arguably sealed the fate of the battle at the start. Rather than wait for the British to shell the Boer position on a nearby ridge, Smut ordered a Boer charge. The Boer horses barely trotted, exhausted from being ridden at such a high volume in such a short time. Artillery flew overhead and exploded behind charging Boers. The Boers didn't stop until they reached the ridge and dismounted. The rebels rapidly reached any natural cover they could and blanketed the British position on the plateau with heavy, accurate fire. At Bronkhorstspruit, the Boers ambushed. At Laing'sNek, they exploited their strong defensive position. At Ingogo, the British initially took the Boers off guard and forced the Boers to improvise. Colley thought the Boers would scatter when met by British fire from Skijnswerkter. Instead, the Boers made excellent cover out of the folds in the ground, even the tall grass. Instead, the Burghers used large rocks to sprint closer and closer to the British position and increase their kill accuracy incrementally. Instead, many of the Boers swarmed right to flank the British. The British took fire from the front and the rear, the British uniform colors sticking out like neon lights in the night. The British took cover from behind rocks in their plateau position, but they couldn't raise their heads above the rocks to take a clear shot at the enemy. Why? When the battle was over, British burial parties came across many British helmets with at least 2 bullet holes. One helmet pierced by 6 different bullets. British artillerymen courageously continued to service their guns and continued to drop as Boers concentrated their fire on them. Colley ordered a mounted squadron charge by Major Brownlow. Major Brownlow wasted valuable time and lives by bringing the mounted squadron to the edge of the plateau and then trying to get them in proper formation. Before the mounted squadron could charge, Boers fired a brutal volley. Laband mentions that the Boers were only 150 yards away when they fired. This sounds far away, at least to me, but that was almost like shooting fish in a bucket for the Boer marksmen. That one Boer volley dropped half of the horses. After being humiliated at Laing'sNek, Major Brownlow now saw no choice but the disgrace of retreating his mounted squadron from the plateau and having everyone dismount. This further soiled his record during this first Boer War. The battle did not get any better for the British. Boer bullets struck half of Colley's artillery force. Men from a British rifle regiment had to start manning the artillery, but before long, Colley decided to pull the artillery back from the edge of the plateau to better cover. This limited the artillery's range. The artillery fired on 100 Boer reinforcements that streamed in from Laing'sNek, but to no avail. The Boers tried to further encircle the British position from the northeast at about 2:30 p.m. Colley dispatched Captain J.C. MacGregor to stop this encirclement. Captain MacGregor fought in both the Anglo-Zulu War and the Sekun-Kuni Wars, and was serving as Colley's assistant military secretary. Captain MacGregor mounted his horse and led a reserve company of the British Rifle Regiment to stop the Boer encirclement. But MacGregor's experience didn't stop him from being incompetent in his final battle. He led this detachment of riflemen to a position too far away from the main British force, too low below the plateau, with too few rocks to offer cover, and too close to the Boer position, just 50 yards away. Only 4 riflemen and 1 officer survived unscathed. The company suffered 56 casualties, killed or wounded, but they bravely held on and saved the main British force from further encirclement. But MacGregor himself could not hold on. Yet another one of Colley's officers shot from his horse. Colley's men begged for a bayonet charge. They were sick of being pinned down for hours by the Boers. But Colley made a couple crucial decisions. Colley learned from recent history and did not order another suicidal bayonet charge. He sent dispatch riders to bring reinforcements. He moved companies around to secure a line of retreat, just in time. But the fighting raged on. Colley's decisions before the battle were catching up. By the afternoon, the British were low on ammunition. After sunset, the Boer force had grown from 200 to 300. But with the steady, lethal bullet barrage billeting Colley's force all day, Colley thought he was facing 1,000 Boers. But even in the face of this gunfire, Colley rode back and forth rallying his men and dispensing orders. At 6 p.m., the Boers raised the white flag. Colley's chaplain rode to meet with the Boers. The Boers moved closer to the British line while the white flag remained raised. Boers kept firing on the flank opposite to where the flag was raised, maybe unaware that a white flag was raised. This was the 3rd time that Boers' bullets flew while a white flag was raised. Colley recalled the chaplain because of continued Boer fire, but the Boers were running out of bullets. Cognizant of this, Commandant-generalNicholaasSmit tried to get his men to make a charge under dark to finish the British. Fearing that they could fire on friend instead of foe in the dark, and confident that the British were trapped, the Boers refused. By 7:30 p.m., everyone stopped shooting. The British set a new, dubious record. They fired about 40 bullets per rifle. 40 rounds. Those of you with better rapid recall than mine will remember that this is twice as many bullets per person fired during the previous Battle of Laing'sNek, and 4 times as many as the average fired during a typical small war battle. The British had fired more artillery here at Ingogo than they had against at least 25 times as many Zulu warriors during the Battle of Ulundi. Colley's men had no food to eat, only rainwater they caught to drink, not enough bullets to survive a Boer charge in the morning. Colley's choice seemed clear. Leave the wounded with the chaplain and the surgeon. Destroy any supplies they couldn't ford across the river. Retreat. Now it was Smut's turn to make a mistake. Smut calculated that the British could not move in the dark and the rain through high water levels of the Ingogo. So Smut set no guards. Instead, Smut sent his men to find shelter from the rain. At 11 p.m., Colley led a night crossing of the coursing Ingogo River that ran up to the men's armpits. 6 men tragically drowned. Colley's men marched all night until they finally reached safety at Mount Prospect, a camp that had itself grown nervous that they would be attacked by Boers. Smut woke to a foggy morning. Smut sent urgent requests to Ewart for more ammunition. Smut and his men were in for a shock. They looked upon yesterday's battlefield and saw nothing but British dead and wounded. They didn't even have British guns to capture. The Boers assumed that they had killed too many British artillery horses for Colley to use them in the river crossing. The Boers spent days searching all around the battlefield for horses the Brits must have hidden. It was all in vain. The good news for the Boers? The Battle of Ingogo cost the British dearly, again. The British suffered 40% casualties, 58 killed and 63 wounded. Colley mourned to his wife that in 2 battles he had lost every personal friend, every officer that he'd eaten with, and that he and his wife had befriended. But Major Lucky Essex survived the battle without even a wound. The Boers lost around 8 killed and 9 wounded. If these war casualty numbers are accurate, the British blasted 514 bullets and 6 artillery shells for each Boer they killed. In the Battle of Ingogo's aftermath, Colley laid a brutal assessment of his troops before one of his bosses. Historian John Laband writes, quote, "Not only had the Boers thrown him back from their defensive positions on Laing'sNek, but they had thoroughly worsted him on open ground at Ingogo as well." Novices, the Boers might have been in the business of tactics, but they were apt students, and in the effective deployment of mounted riflemen, they had shown the outclassed British that a new power had been developed in war. Laband continues, "None of his troops were nearly as well trained as the Boers in musketry, skirmishing, equitation, and the use of cover. That his artillery did not at all compensate for his crucial lack of good mounted troops, which had told so heavily against him. As a result of all these deficiencies, his unfortunate troops, despite a superficial cheeriness, were acquiring a fatal sense of inferiority and a want of confidence in themselves." End quote. If you appreciate and value what we're doing here at Forgotten Wars, would you help our show continue this season and for future seasons by doing one or even 2 things? First, would you rate and write a review for our podcast on whatever podcast app you use? If you've already done that, thank you very much. Second, would you check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/ForgottenWars. You can support the show there for something as manageable as $4 a month. Depending on how you support the show, you can get extra access to show sources and transcripts, early access to bonus episodes, have your name worked into the show in a couple of ways, and more. Thanks for even giving this little blurb a listen. I appreciate you.